Yes, we're live to go.
Thank you so much. Good evening and welcome to this virtual council meeting of Charnwood Borough Council. I would briefly like to run through some housekeeping arrangements. Please note this meeting is being live streamed and recorded, and the recording will be made available on the council's website following the meeting. In addition, under openness of local government body regulations, people may film, record, tweet or blog from any of this meeting, and this is outside the council's control. Please note the members of the public viewing the meeting via the live stream can only see the person who is speaking. Also that it takes a second or two for the Zoom to switch view to the person when they begin. Participants should please ensure that their microphone is muted when they are not speaking. As this is a virtual meeting, it will run slightly differently. Councillors and honorary aldermen, please use the raise hand feature in the participant section of the Zoom software to indicate that you can see and hear the proceedings. I'll just check with Karen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I can confirm that everyone is in attendance, and I do have some apologies, which I'll read out in the next section. Then we have 3 apologies for this meeting.
Thank you. I just say as well, the officer in attendance tonight is Rob Mitchell, the Chief Executive, Adrian Ward, the Monitoring Officer, Simon Jackson, the S151 Officer, Karen Widdison, the Democratic Services Manager, Matt Goodyear, Information Development Manager, Sally Watson, Democratic Services Officer, and Wayne Brooks, Democratic and Minority Assistant. The first item on the agenda is apologies for absence. Apologies have been received from Honorary Alderman Tormey, Honorary Alderman Bush, and Shields. Could I ask Karen for the other?
Yep. So, Mr. Mayor, I can confirm that in addition, we have apologies from Honorary Alderman Stott as well, and we also have apologies from Councillors Jill Bolton, Councillor Christine Harris, and from Councillor Jane Hunt. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much. Now, moving on, I'm delighted and thank the next one is that my chaplain, Richard Tathui, will be saying a few words for me. Welcome, Richard, and I'm delighted that you accepted to be my chaplain, and I hope you enjoy the time with me. I know time's shot by already, but it's lovely to see you tonight, and I leave it to you now. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's been my privilege to be invited, and I am only sorry that it's been at such a strange time that I've not been able before now to take up any of my duties. This week, of course, is a very particular week for all of us. We find ourselves between Remembrance Sunday and Armistice Day, in a week when we are particularly thinking how grateful we are for the peace that we have experienced over the last few years, and pray that we will continue to experience in the next few. But aware that peace has 2 elements. One is the absence of conflict externally, but also peace is a matter of the state of our heart and mind. And you are meeting at a time when the challenges to that state of heart and mind are very clear. We live at a time of almost unprecedented challenge to people's mental health. The isolation, the anxiety, the uncertainty which people are experiencing. I did hear of one lady in her 90s recently who told me that she found it worse than her experience during the Second World War, simply because she couldn't see her friends. And you, as councillors and as a council, have responsibility alongside other agencies, obviously, to help people with that well-being and mental health where possible. But it did make me think of Corrie ten Boom, who was a survivor of the concentration camps in the Second World War, lost her older sister and her father while they were being in captivity. And her words, where she said, "Worrying doesn't empty tomorrow of its sorrow, it empties today of its strength." And I think all of us would want to know the secret to not worrying, Paul wrote in his letter to Philippians, "Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition with thanksgiving, present your requests to God, and the peace of God will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus." So aware, as we are this week, of the painful lessons of the past, aware of the challenging responsibility that faces us in the present, but with hope for the future, I'd invite you, if you would like to join me in some of these prayers and collects for Remembrance Day. Please do say amen if you wish to join in prayer. Almighty and eternal God, from whose love in Christ we cannot be parted either by death or life, hear our prayers and thanksgiving for all whom we remember this day. Hear our prayers for all who strive for peace and all who fight for justice. Help us, who remember now the cost of war, to work for a better tomorrow. And as we commend to you lives lost in terror and conflict, bring us all in the end to the peace of your presence. Through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen.
Richard, thank you so much, and stay as long as you can, and we thank you for that. We'll now move on to item 2, disclosure of personal interest. Using the raised hand feature, members of the council, please indicate whether you have any other interest to disclose in any item of the business to be considered at the meeting. I can't see any hands raising, so I'll move on. Can I just check with Karen that that's right?
Yes, that is correct, Mr. Mayor. There are no raised hands, so there are no disclosures of personal interest.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Item 3, minutes of the previous meeting. I move that the minutes of the meeting of the council held on the 7th of September 2020 be confirmed and signed as a correct record. Councillor Baines.
I second the minutes, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to raise anything on the accuracy of the minutes? If so, please state the minute number in your question. Since no issues have been raised, I take this as signify that the minutes are acceptable and correct record. Thank you. I will sign now the official minutes I have here with me and pass them to Democratic Service Manager in due course for archiving. The next item is item 4, announcements. I have one announcement. I have the following announcement to make. It was great personal honour for me to take part in this year's Loughborough Remembrance Service. If this was a normal year, we would have had all come together to remember those who served and many who made the ultimate sacrifice for their country. I was pleased we were able to, albeit in limited numbers, to honour all past, present and serving members and their families within our armed service community, especially the ones who have been involved in many conflicts around the world, making sure we have made a safer place for our children and future generations. Tomorrow, I will be involved in a service for Armistice Day, which will be streamed on the 11th of November. This marks 102 years since the end of the First World War, when the guns fell silent on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month in 1918. We should never forget. Leader's announcements. I call on the leader to make his announcements.
Mr. Mayor, I would like to announce that Councillor Popley has been appointed Disabilities Champion for the Council. As part of this role, Councillor Popley will be responsible for supporting the Council to achieve its Disability Competent accreditation and to uphold all relevant policies and practices, identifying areas where disabled provision could be improved within Loughborough and the wider borough, particularly through the use of quality impact assessments, and working with the Equalities team to help promote disability awareness across the borough, supporting celebration events such as International Day of People with Disabilities and other associated events throughout the calendar year, and ensuring that elected members have appropriate disability equality awareness training. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Leader. Now call on the Chief Executive to make his announcements.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have no announcements to make.
Thank you. Next item is item 5, petitions. Are there any petitions to be presented? I can't see any respondents in accordance with the council petition scheme, but I'll move on. I can't see any. Business reserved to council, item 6. 6.1, update capital strategy 2020-21, page 15. I call on Councillor Barclay to propose the item.
Mr. Mayor, to seek approval of an updated capital strategy 2020-21, together with the Treasury Management Strategy Statement, the Annual Investment Strategy, and the Minimum Revenue Provision Policy, I move the recommendations 1 to 3 on page 15 of the agenda, the reasons for each of the recommendations which are on page 15 of the agenda.
Councillor Morgan.
Mr. Mayor, I second this and reserve my right.
Thank you. If any councillor would like to speak, please press the raise hand feature in Zoom. Could I call on Councillor Gilmere?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The capital strategy is a very hefty document. What is contained runs through several other agenda items we have in front of us this evening. Having read the strategy, I wanted to share a concern I have specifically around the level of borrowing the council is being asked to approve. A total of £55 million of borrowing is being asked for. So I asked myself, how did we get to this? How does the council find itself needing to borrow so much money in order for it to deliver its everyday services? The answer, Mr. Mayor, is simple, and it's one the other side will not like to hear, but true nonetheless. Austerity. A decade of underfunding and of kicking the can down the road has meant we now need to borrow vast amounts to secure some residual income to help pay for our everyday services and fill gaps within the budget. We are being asked to increase the borrowing limit to purchase commercial property from £10 million to £25 million. There are no concrete reasons as to why the substantial need for the increase or why now. I would have thought that if we were ever going to consider an increase, it would have been on the back of a report once the strategy was in full swing and £10 million was spent or close to being spent, and it could be scrutinised as to how successful it had been. Instead, we are being asked to rubber stamp a 150% increase in borrowings now. Also concerning me is the forward funding of some aspects of the enterprise zone. I must remind members that this is a privately owned site where we are being asked to approve £15 million of borrowings from the public purse to further develop it. I'm not entirely sure how the return of the £15 million is to be achieved and what the timeline of that return would be. I would be grateful for some clarification. I'm not against the proposal per se, but lack of detail and just a statement saying we expect to get it back on future business rates payment isn't sufficient for me. In closing, Mr. Mayor, I don't agree with this capital strategy. It's asking for us to expand borrowing to purchase commercial property when, in my view, the case for the increased borrowing hasn't been made. It is asking us to use unborrowed public. It is asking for us to use public money to develop a private site with no clear indication as to how the money would be returned and the timeline of such return. Therefore, I will not be supporting this item. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Draycott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In February, Council agreed a strategy which included increasing the Council's income by the spend of up to £10 million to purchase commercial property. It was clear to councillors in doing so that most of the other items in the capital plan would be would remain in the plan. That was a big consideration when members voted for the strategy. Tonight's report will mean two major changes. First, from £10 million, it actually increases to £55 million for 3 projects. And the second big change is that everything apart from those projects will be removed from the capital plan. The report states on a number of occasions that, quote, no guarantee though any of the £55 million will actually be spent, end of quote. So I'd like to ask Mr. Mayor, why haven't those items that have been removed tonight or being proposed to be removed tonight become a reserve list? Preparatory work could still take place. So there is the opportunity during the year for when we have amended capital plan reports for them to be included. And another point I'd like to raise, and hopefully an answer, I see no reference in the document at all to capital receipts for the possible sale of the Southfield site. And I know other sites are under consideration. So I ask again, why no reserve list running parallel to this one? Could the leader and cabinet lead respond to those points, please, Mr. Mayor? Thank you.
Thank you. I've got one more speaker, which is Mr. Ted Parton, or Councillor Ted Parton.
There we go. When councillors last week attended the training on the commercialisation strategy, this was carefully planned in preparation for the presentation of the documents in front of us, and also to give councillors the opportunity to ask questions of the Chief Executive, the leader, the lead member for finance, and the relevant director. The leadership team at the council now have a sterling track record in private sector investment in another part of the Midlands, and it gives us confidence that they can, with the knowledge and the ambition of the leader, to fulfil this in Charnwood. I very carefully say Charnwood, I don't mean Loughborough, I mean Charnwood. A question I asked last week was, what are the acceptable yields and returns? And the answer I was given, and you can find this for yourself on page 35, is 3.5%. You can also see how carefully money we are attempting to gain finance wherever we can. For example, on page 32, point 3.5, assuming an average fund under management of 50 million, an increase in return by an average of 0.1%, this would generate additional income of £50,000 per annum. In the current situation, every penny counts, and last week we saw just how carefully and methodically the process of investment is, and that's the reason why I'll be supporting this motion.
Thank you. I haven't got any more speakers, so I go back to the seconder, Councillor Morgan, the leader, to have his second.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and thank you very much, Councillor Parsons, for pointing out the training sessions that all councillors had been invited to, and the vast majority had actually turned up to. And they were very informative sessions, an opportunity to quiz, well, first of all, listen, and then quiz, and hopefully get any questions answered from the senior officer team as to how the capital strategy was going to work. it's quite clear that the capital strategy is actually three very distinct elements. The first is the commercial property investment, which is about creating a revenue stream for the council so we can actually invest that in running services across the borough. The capital strategy that the council's already seen actually did have a limit of 25 million. The expectation was that that was going to be within the next 3 years. Since our meeting, our last council meeting at the end of February, which was our last council meeting in person, obviously the pandemic has actually ripped through the whole of the country, including Charnwood, and has created a great number of challenges. One of those obviously being financial to the council, and hence the reason that we wish to bring forward the £25 million limit to mirror the challenges that we're actually now facing. Also, since then, we've actually had some positive news on the town deal, and hence the reason need for some capital to invest, hopefully, in the borough. And it won't be just about the town deal investment within Loughborough. It also gives us the opportunity to invest in regeneration schemes across the whole of the borough. And then the third element is the investment in the enterprise zones. And that investment is on a basis of loans supported by business rate income. These are not grants, these are loans. The investment will come back with an additional rate of interest that will actually be to the benefit of the borough, its residents and its services. So as Councillor Parsons set out very clearly, there are three very beneficial elements to this capital strategy for us and our residents and businesses within the borough. And I will commend it to council to support, because this is about investing in our future. And this is making sure that the services that we provide for our residents are the best that we can within the resources we have available. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I now ask Councillor Barclay to sum up?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a capital strategy document. It's completely wrong to say that the rest of the capital plan, which comes up in the third item on, has been put aside apart from these investments. These investments are very clear. What this strategy does tell us of how we manage our cash flow, how we manage our investments, the borrowing limits, so they still remain prudent. It's got a large amount of detail of the criteria that any investment we make has to meet. Rather exciting, £15 million to regenerate both within the town and within the borough. And we intend to probably attract other people into this to make it significantly a private contribution towards regenerating, could bring the total investment up to 110 million. We've got to take the opportunities, particularly when the nation has been in crisis and we're coming out of COVID. As the leader has already said, this has been clearly explained in all meetings, and to confuse the actual strategy document with the capital plan is quite stunning. I just can't believe that it's not been read. And it clearly hasn't, because this is a strategy document showing exactly what we're going to do. As regarding the concerns about the enterprise zone, we fought hard to get an enterprise zone. It's good for the borough, it's good for employment, and it's good for the economy. And again, it'll lift us out of the problems that we've received from COVID. The money will be lent to the Leicester and Enterprise Board, who will then forward it to any recipient, and we will get paid back through the business rates scheme. There's no doubt about that. We will make sure that happens. So there's no need to concern yourself with that. The actual strategy shows how we will approach every investment. I thought both the chief executive and the commercial director had given a very clear indication of how we're going to proceed, so much so that it is disappointing to see that people still do not know the difference between the capital strategy and the capital plan. It's quite disappointing, to say the least. I think in the middle of a national crisis, we need as a council to work together to make sure that our borough has a future. Tonight we've heard scaremongering, but there is no need to be frightened. We will make sure, this administration will make sure that we deliver, and we always have done in the past, and we will do again. We face challenges which can be overcome and will be overcome. I see no alternative strategy coming forward from the Labour group or any other group. This is a sound strategy. It has been tried and tested, and I commend it to all councillors and ask that we work together in these very difficult times.
Thank you. I'm now going to put the motion to the vote. This is a little bit different this time. Members should indicate the way in which they wish to vote by raising their virtual hand, and the votes will be counted and verified. Members for the motion, please raise your virtual hand.
So, Mr. Mayor, I will read out the names of the councillors who voted for. We will then tally them up, and Karen Widowson and myself will confirm the numbers, if that's okay with yourself.
That's fine. Thank you.
So, councillors voting for: Councillor Smidovitz, Councillor Barclay. Sorry, I'll start again because the order's just changed. Councillor Fryer, Councillor Capleton, Councillor Grimley, Councillor Bradshaw. The names are, Karen, the names are switching around.
Okay, so what we need to do, everyone vote now, and then I will tell you to stop voting, because what's happening is your hand is moving in the queue. So if everybody can now finish voting for the opposition, please. Thank you. And then Adrian can commence counting. Thank you.
Can you all leave your hands raised until we finish the list of names, please? Because I think that's what's causing the problems. Councillor Grimley, Councillor Simon Bradshaw, Councillor Harper Davies, Councillor Bailey, Councillor Shepherd, Councillor Morgan, Councillor Popley, Councillor Howe, Councillor Poland, Councillor Lowe, Councillor Gerard, Councillor Taylor, Councillor Rattray, Councillor Paling, Councillor Charles, Councillor Parton, Councillor Savage, Councillor Brooks, Councillor Murphy, Councillor Baines, Councillor Pacey, Councillor Radford, Councillor Parsons, Councillor Tassell, Councillor Bentley, Councillor Seaton, Councillor Rollings, Councillor Mercer, Councillor Barclay, Councillor Campsall, Councillor Ranson, Councillor Capleton, Councillor Fryer, Councillor Smidovitz, Councillor Needham, so that is 35 votes for. I make it, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Can I confirm that we've done?
I confirm 35 votes for as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, could
blue hands now, please.
Councillor, sorry, I have voted, but there's no blue hand available to me.
So we will add your vote on Councillor Boker, so that's 36 for. So if we can lower all of the hands, please.
Brilliant. Thank you. Members against the vote, please raise your virtual hand.
So councillors voting against: Councillor Draycott, Councillor Mia, Councillor Baldwin, Councillor Keith Harris, Councillor Julie Bradshaw, Councillor Hamilton, Councillor Goddard, Councillor Tillotson, Councillor Brennan, Councillor Ward, Councillor Forrest, So I make that 11, Karen.
Confirm I've got 11 as well.
Thank you. Members wishing to abstain, please raise your virtual hand.
We need to clear the hands, so bear with us.
So there are no abstentions, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for that, and the motion is carried. Thank you. Item 6.2 is revised general fund budget 2020-21 and the medium-term financial strategy, page 79. May I remind councillors that it is a legal requirement that all votes taken on this item, including votes on amendments, must be recorded votes. There is also another slight difference in the procedure for this item, in that, in addition to the normal rules for the length of the speeches, one member of the Conservative group and one member of the Labour group have the right to speak for 5 minutes, rather than 3 minutes in the debate of the budget. It would be helpful if councillors exercising this right and the councillors proposing amendments could indicate that they are doing so at the beginning of their speech. I call on Councillor Barclay to oppose the item.
Mr. Mayor, to seek approval of the revised general fund budget 2020-21 and updated medium-term financial strategy 2020 to 2023, given the material impact of the COVID-19 outbreak on the council's financial position, I move recommendations 1 and 2 on page 79 of the agenda for the reasons for each of the recommendations which are on page 79 of the agenda.
Councillor Rollins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I second this item and reserve my right to speak.
Thank you. If any councillor would like to speak, please press the raise hand feature in Zoom. Councillor Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to take the allocated 5 minutes for the Labour Group, if you wouldn't mind.
Thank you.
I wish I could be more upbeat about this budget than I was about the capital strategy, but unfortunately, having read it, I can't. Who can ever be optimistic or support a report that states we'll be in deficit by £1.8 million this year, £2.1 million the year after, and a further £1.7 million in 2022-23, and face insolvency at that time, because that's what the report says. If alarm bells haven't begun to ring already, I hope they are now. We are all now aware of the impact that COVID has. It's put a massive strain on our finances. The £3.8 million hit this year alone is well documented and in the report, and that's just £3.8 million to date. We don't know what the second wave will cost us. Nothing could really prepare our council for what's happened, but I feel the ruling administration is partly to blame for the predicament we find ourselves in. The choices it's made in the past and some of the decisions during the early part of the pandemic have simply compounded our problems. It is no coincidence that the widening deficit gap in this year's budget from 1.1 million to 1.8 million is around the amount that the council has used to bail out our private leisure centre provider. Nor is it a coincidence that we have failed to bring in any monies on our commercialisation endeavours, having first mooted to do so several years ago. It's probably fairer to say that we wouldn't be in this situation in the first place if the government had kept its promise at the start of the crisis to fund councils for the full impact of the pandemic. Instead, we are seeing a drip feed of monies to local authorities, which makes forecasting budgets such as this very difficult and offers little reassurance or certainty to the council. There is not much in the way of positivity in this budget, which is full of caveats and warnings with little in the way of detail as to how we will balance this and future budgets. Reductions in services provided by the council, increased charges and job losses are all a real possibility and much so in the near future. The prospects of increasing losses in council tax revenue, business rates collection and rental income collection is also a real and worrying prospect. Only action on a national level has so far kept them from being unmanageable for the council, and something I feel the council will need to keep a keen eye on, as slippages in these collection rates will only increase our deficits going forward. I won't be supporting this budget, Mr. Mayor. You'll be surprised to know. It's not a balanced budget. no matter what Councillor Barclay says, as it uses far more of our reserves without any details as to how we are going to get any of our overspends under control. The Cabinet should never, ever, in my view, be asking Council to approve a paper that gives such a stark warning that the Council faces insolvency without detailed mitigation also being included on how they will prevent it from happening. Mr. Mayor, I'm going to ad lib a little bit because Councillor Barclay has said that we should all work together in the best interest for our borough. And it's easy to say that in a public meeting such as this when we all meet. But the crisis has been going on now for 7 or 8 months now. And I don't think I recall Mr. Barclay ever getting in contact, Mr. Tom Barclay, ever getting in contact with myself, or I would say any of my colleagues directly to offer any assistance or help or support or advice, or just for a chat. And I think it's very thingy of him to come to a public meeting and say we should work in the best interest of the borough, when he, as a cabinet member and as a cabinet member in lead for finance, hasn't actually shown any of that himself, that characteristics himself. And I think that's disingenuous to everybody here, and he's taking the public for fools, really. So I just wanted to put that on record that yes, we will work in the interest of the public. We're all here to do that, but that shouldn't be a stick to beat the opposition with, because especially if he hasn't made the first move himself, and he's in a position to have done that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Paul Baldwin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have a question about the increase in the Serco contract from 419,000 to 580,000 in 2022-2023 on page 93 of the agenda. I'd like to know what lies behind such a large increase.
Thank you. Councillor Mary Draycott.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I'd like to place on record the excellent job done by officers since the pandemic hit Charnwood. The fact that the council has maintained most services and are continuing to do so during this second wave does deserve a big thank you. Unfortunately, though, the government has not covered all of the council's necessary expenditure for its loss of incomes. And I would also like to remind council that the pandemic alone is not responsible for all the bad news in this report. I couldn't find reference to it, but the backdrop has been the 10 years of austerity, and airbrushing it, which I believe is the terminology these days used, is not acceptable. It should be referred to in the report and has not been forgotten by Labour members. The main part of this report is actually quite clearly stated on page 86, paragraph 15. It clearly is saying that the council, or we, are being asked to agree that for this financial year, a total now of £1.8 million will be needed from reserves. Next year, a further 2.1 million will be needed from reserves. None of these, by the way, can take into account what's going to happen in the next 6 months, right? So that is still to come. So in 2022-23, a further £1.7 million is estimated to be needed. So in 2 years' time, this report clearly says, as Councillor Mayor has referred to, we will not have any reserves. We will be in deficit, possibly more deficit than what's headed in this report, 600,000. And there is clearly no doubt that 10 years of austerity cuts to all public services, plus now a pandemic, has put this council, like so many across the country, on the point of their services ending completely. Just on a personal note, Mr. Mayor, I am in my 33rd year as a councillor, and I can now actually see the end of local government as I know it. And I find that very sad indeed, Mr. Mayor. So Labour members will not be supporting this report. And it would be nice just once, Councillor Barclay, if you could actually respond to the questions that are being asked by the opposition members. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Ted Parton.
What we have to do in intense situations is constantly look for solutions.
Ted, we can hardly hear you. I don't know what you've done. It's very difficult. Should I come back to you?
So can you not hear me? Can you not hear me at the moment?
I can now.
Oh, okay.
No, it's gone again. It's gone again. I think we'll leave you and I'll come back to you if I may. Councillor Fryer.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I seem to make this speech nearly every year now when we get to this point in the council calendar. Thank goodness we have got the council that we have, the officers that we have, and the lead members that we have. I was elected to this council in 2003 and have served with no break since then. In 2007, when we became into the administration, we had no money, we had no reserves, we had zero, our standards of housing were zero. Thank goodness we have got reserves. Thank goodness this has been well managed. I find it interesting that the opposition to the last gender item didn't want to support it, which would have given more money to this council. And now they're moaning that they aren't doing anything. I think also to say that the lead member and the councillors have not approached the opposition to discuss with them their ideas. Well, surely the opposition could have come to us and come to the lead member and the leader and say, this is our idea, this is what we would do. So far, no ideas have come forward from them. And I find this really quite sad that we are supposed to be working together and we are supposed to be all for the benefit of the residents of Charnwood, but no ideas have come forward. And we've only got to the second item, the major item on the agenda tonight, and no ideas from the opposition. So I will be supporting this item. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Right, Councillor Ted Parton, do you want to have another go?
Right, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Can you hear me now?
I can, loud and clear.
And you can hear me clearly?
Yes.
Good, all right. My apologies to you and to everybody. What we look for in difficult times is leadership. And good leadership is not taking an easy decision, it's taking difficult decisions when the only two options are both difficult. And what I will say about the leader and the lead member for finance is you only have to look at the energy, the intelligence, and most crucially their integrity in leading this council with the assistance of our excellent officers and chief executive through what can only be described as a horrific year. We heard the expression 10 years of. What I would say we've seen is we've seen 10 years of balanced budgets, we've seen 10 years of award-winning services, and we've seen 10 years of supporting our most vulnerable. And this year, where we had to make a decision about spending way more than we would have wanted to, rather than 10 years, we've had 1 year of most intense pressure, but that money has been spent supporting our local economy, supporting the most vulnerable, One only had to walk through the town centre every day during that lockdown on the period where you were allowed out to see the action that was happening at John Storer House. And money was being poured into that because it needed to be. So I would say that in specifics, where we talk about things like, for example, the fusion contract, well, that was called in under scrutiny, reassessed and passed again. So I would encourage people to look at the record of the leader and the lead member and actually see that we have no other alternative at the moment but to support our most vulnerable, despite the fact we face an uncertain financial future. They're finding solutions, and that's the main objective, and we will find solutions going years down the line. We will survive.
Thank you. Councillor Jeff Parsons.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Good evening. In law, there are well-recognised levels of certainty. Beyond all reasonable doubt, we are 90–95% certain. Level of probability, balance of probability, we are 51–49. In another world which I'm part of, in the world of anti-doping, we have a thing called comfortably satisfied, which is when we're 70–80% sure of something. For the last few years, as somebody who has sat on the budget scrutiny panel, has chaired budget scrutiny panel, and I think members opposite me in the chamber would support that I am at most times an extraordinarily robust scrutineer, I have been comfortably satisfied with the budgets for the last few years. I have to say that I am moving more this year toward balance of probability. It's a much tougher environment and a tougher regime. Where I disagree with members opposite me is that supporting frontline services and maintaining them, and in some places actually improving them, managing to put some reserves away to buy time, which the reserves are now doing for us, to continue to improve and rationalise our services and our finances going forward, is prudent and wise budgeting. It's not austerity. Austerity is slash and burn. This council cannot be accused in any way of doing that. We have challenges ahead. It does concern me that the continual reference to the commercial strategy seems to be everybody's great saviour, and I think it will be good. I have supported the commercialisation of aspects of this council. I will continue to do so. I will continue to be extremely concerned about the timing and level of scrutiny. However, I have supported the commercialisation of aspects of this council and will continue to do so. It is a wise and prudent course. But in going forward, we do have other significant risks in this budget, which all of us must be aware, from the new homes bonus to council house potential deficits in terms of rent payments to council tax collections. We have significant challenges ahead. This budget is an attempt to deal with them. And as I said, I'm no longer comfortably satisfied. I'm now balance of probability. It's getting tougher, but it's getting tougher for everybody. And we're not in the situation of a council, as we've seen with Northamptonshire, Croydon most recently. We are a better and more prudent council in those aspects. I will be supporting tonight. It's getting tougher. It's getting tougher to maintain that support, but I will be supporting tonight. I will continue to challenge. I will continue to seek better times and better levels of scrutiny. That the 1920 outturn accounts were not scrutinised by this council is shocking. That were not done properly. However, this is an attempt to make things better going forward, and I wholeheartedly support the attempts of 6.1, 6.2 and 6.3 tonight to do so. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Julian Howe, please.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Sorry, I can't stand up, else I'll disappear. I'll just mention two items I've read recently. This week, an external auditor was highly critical of a £38 million loss on Robin Hood Energy by Labour-led Nottingham Council. Another Labour-led council, Croydon, is in crisis, where the auditors have stepped in with a damning report in the public interest in which the finances have been mishandled. I've got every confidence this won't happen in Charnwood. Thank you.
Thank you. I can't see any more hands raised now. Oh, sorry, Councillor Deborah Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think my hand dropped away somewhere. I just think we ought to be really careful what language we use, especially this evening, you know, using language like insolvent and local authority disappearing in this kind of environment is very, very unhelpful and very unsettling for our residents. I think we're all aware of the pandemic we're in, how difficult it is for everybody. But it's due to the good position that this council went into this pandemic that we are where we are and in a good position to move forward and support our residents. There's many people there out in our communities that are really struggling at the moment, not only financially, but with their mental health, their jobs, their families, their children, their, you know, what's going to happen going forward. And I think we just need to be really careful that we show the community out there that this is a strong council, that we're here to support them. We're not going to fall over. We're not going to be insolvent. We're here to support them. We'll deliver the services they need. And we will remain positive, unlike the opposition that have just said negative, negative, negative. That is so unhelpful in this climate. And I'm disgusted with those sort of comments in this chamber. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. I have no more hands raised. So I call on Councillor Rollins, who reserved his right.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just briefly, I think Councillor Taylor's made a couple of points I wanted to, but there is something ironic about the Labour leader saying this council is facing increasing deficit whilst criticising the previous item where clear strategies are being put in place to plug the gap between our income and expenditure. In terms of the reference to insolvency, I think that's an appalling misrepresentation of the true position, which is quite clearly stated in the report. The very item before us tonight highlights what we're doing to counteract the risk of insolvency. And if you look at the report, it says very clearly that will only be the position if we do nothing. We're not doing nothing. There are 6 very clear items highlighted in the report as to exactly what steps we're taking to avoid that drastic situation, which is not going to happen here. Things are being put in place now. This report's necessary given a worldwide pandemic that nobody could foresee back in February. I fully support it, and I support the actions that officers and councillors are taking to make sure we do plug that gap. And I agree entirely with what Councillor Taylor said. We need to be very careful about what language we use at a public meeting because it is not helpful. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. I now call on Councillor Barclay to sum up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Interesting tonight. Always have been happy to speak with any member of the opposition. I've sat in front of the scrutiny commissions about nothing has come forward, nothing whatsoever. Really, we are here tonight to debate and talk about the revised budget. The revised budget there's a tremendous amount of work gone into it by the finance team. The lead member has a briefing as a lead member from the finance head, the same as I do. He has the same opportunity to input ideas as I do. We work as a council. It isn't dependent on a call from the leader of the opposition to me. I'm more than willing to listen to anybody, but we have gone through a rigorous process scrutinising this budget. Some missed facts that have been quoted is that we created the COVID-19 crisis. I don't think so. We have actually received substantial government assistance. The losses that we've suffered of 3.8 million, so far we've received 2.2 million from the government, and we're expecting some more money, about another 1.2 million. It clearly lays out what we are going to do. You can see that we have got already identified savings of 1.2 million next year. We have, as Councillor Rhines has said, a plan going forward. We're doing service reviews. And yes, we do face challenges, but this budget contains nothing from the Labour group, nothing at all. It's all this administration. There is no input whatsoever No effort, no input, complete misreading of the reports. The public need to be aware that this administration will work for them. I think the efforts of the officers and the council during the pandemic have been absolutely exemplary. I think they've shown it's shown the character of this council. And to sit tonight in a public meeting and criticise what this council has done is totally wrong. We have supported the vulnerable. We have supported services, maintained services. We've gone on and beyond. We've transformed the way that we help people. In other words, we've delivered to the vulnerable in our society. Fortunately, we do have the reserves to cope, and we have, you can see in the medium-term financial strategy, we have at least 2 years to get it sorted out. We're actually working already. In fact, we have a train of things coming through, which we hope will help a lot. There is still more work to be done, I don't deny it, and it gets more and more difficult. But we have a strategy, we have a plan, and we have some ideas. And to the Leader of the Opposition, my door is always open. My phone is always available for him to talk. I'd welcome any input. I'd welcome any ideas or suggestions. Today, it has been a desert. Not one. I feel as though very alone, that we have no clues at all, just complete criticism, completely wrong. And not indicating that there is a complete misunderstanding of what is going on. Great hope for the future, and have formulated a way out of the current challenges which we must implement. Working together as a council, we can overcome this crisis. I don't know any more than anyone else does what the future holds, but the investment we can make in the borough and the income we can generate, and also the hope we have got with the capital plan coming forward, really does give us hope. I think stewardship, sustainability, and appropriate and timely action is what we intend to do. This medium-term financial strategy shows what will happen if we do nothing. If we did what the Labour group did, absolutely nothing, no ideas, nothing. When we took over, this council would no longer be able to operate if we had the reserves we had when the Labour group was in at the administration. I think that we have hard times, but I think what has happened tonight in this council meeting is absolutely shameful. It's to criticise the council and its officers to what they have done. I absolutely agree with Mary Draycott. I think they've done a great job, and I commend Mary for saying it. As far as questions are concerned, you have question time to ask officers. You've asked me about the environmental services contract. Well, if you knew what you were talking about and you knew what was happened, you know that we continued the use of the existing fleet 2 years. There was no charge of that. We're now taking on a new fleet and there are additional charges. So that's the answer to that one. But questions can be asked in scrutiny. They can have officers.
Councillor Barclay, I'm going to have to stop you. You've gone over your time limit. Sorry about that.
Oh, right. Well, I commend this budget and MTFS to the council.
Thank you. Thank you. As I said, this is going to be a recorded vote. So I'm now putting the motion to the vote, and we'll ask the Chief Executive to call out the names of each councillor so that their vote can be recorded. I would like to remind members that if at any point they did not hear all the proceedings from this item, they should not participate in the vote.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So please, councillors, when I call your name, can you confirm that you have listened and watched the proceedings? Then please confirm if you are for, against, or abstaining from the motion. Councillor Richard Bailey.
Thank you, Chief Executive. I have seen and heard the proceedings. I now am for the motion.
Councillor Paul Baines.
Seen, heard, and for the motion.
Councillor Tom Barclay.
Thank you, Chief Executive. I've seen and heard the debate, and I am for the motion.
Councillor Ian Bentley.
Seen and heard and for the motion.
Councillor Jenny Boker.
Seen and heard and for the motion.
Councillor Paul Baldwin.
Seen and heard and against the motion.
Councillor Simon Bradshaw.
Thank you, Chief Executive. I've seen and heard and I'm for the motion.
Councillor Julie Bradshaw.
I've seen and heard and am against the motion.
Councillor Alice Brennan.
I've seen and heard and I'm against the motion.
Councillor Matthew Brooks.
Seen and heard and I'm for the motion.
Councillor Roy Campsell.
Definitely for.
Can you just confirm for me that you've seen and heard proceedings? Thank you, Councillor Campsell.
Yes, I've seen and heard and I'm definitely for.
Thank you very much. Councillor John Capleton.
Thank you, Chief Exec. I've seen and heard proceedings and I'm in favour of the motion.
Councillor Mark Charles.
Thank you. I can confirm I've seen and heard the proceedings and I'm for the motion.
Councillor Lee Harper Davis.
Thank you, Chief Executive. I can see and hear proceedings and I'm for the motion.
Councillor Mary Draycott.
I've seen and heard and against.
Councillor Sandy Forrest.
Seen and heard and against. Thank you.
Councillor Hilly Fryer.
Thank you. I have seen and heard the debate and I am for the motion.
Councillor Sue Gerard. Councillor Sue Gerard. You may be on mute, Councillor.
Seen, heard, for.
Thank you, Councillor Gerard. Councillor Kat Goddard.
Thank you. I've seen and heard and I'm against the motion.
Councillor Daniel Grimley.
Thank you. I've seen and heard the proceedings and confirm that I'm for the motion.
Councillor Leon Hajai Nicolau.
I've seen and heard and I'm for the motion. Thank you.
Councillor Colin Hamilton.
Thank you, Chief Executive. I've seen and heard and I'm against.
Councillor Keith Harris.
Thank you, Chief Exec. I've seen and heard and I'm against.
Councillor Julian Howe.
Thank you. I've seen and heard the debate and I'm for the motion.
Councillor Mark Lowe.
Thank you. I've seen and heard and I'm for the motion.
Councillor Paul Mercer.
I've seen, I've heard and I'm in favour.
Councillor Joel Meyer.
Thank you, Chief Executive. I've seen, I've heard and I'm against the motion.
Councillor Jonathan Morgan.
Good evening, Chief Executive. I've seen and heard and I'm for the motion.
Councillor Paul Murphy.
I've seen and heard and I'm for the motion. Thank you.
Councillor Laurie Needham.
Thank you. I've seen and heard the debate and I'm for the motion.
Councillor Ken Pacey.
I've seen and heard the proceedings and vote for the motion.
Councillor Andy Paling.
Chief Exec, I can confirm I've seen and heard the motion and I'm for the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jeff Parsons.
Thank you, Chief Executive. Seen, heard and for.
Councillor Ted Parton.
Chief Executive, I've seen and heard and I'm for the motion.
Councillor James Poland.
Chief Exec, seen, heard, for.
Councillor Robin Popley.
Thank you, Chief Exec. I've seen, heard and I'm for the motion.
Councillor Christine Radford.
Thank you, Chief Exec. I've seen, heard and for the motion.
Councillor Pauline Ransom.
Good evening, Chief Exec. I've seen and heard and I'm for the motion.
Councillor Shona Rattray.
Thank you, Chief Exec. I've seen and heard the proceedings and I'm for the motion.
Councillor Roy Rollings.
Thank you. I have seen, heard and I'm for the motion.
Councillor John Savage.
Seen, heard and for the motion.
Councillor Brenda Seaton.
Thank you, Chief Exec. I've seen and heard and I'm for the motion.
Councillor Richard Shepherd.
I've seen and heard and I'm for the motion.
Councillor Margaret Smidowitz.
Thank you, Chief Exec. I've seen, heard, and I'm for the motion.
Councillor David Snart.
Thank you, Chief Executive. I have seen and heard, and I am for the motion.
Councillor Joan Tassell.
Thank you. I have seen and heard, and I'm for the motion.
Councillor Deborah Taylor.
Thank you, Chief Exec. I've seen and heard the debate, and I'm for the motion.
Councillor Jenny Tillotson.
Thank you. I've seen and heard, and I'm against the motion.
Councillor Emma Ward.
Thank you. I've seen and heard, and I am against the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That completes the name vote. I'm looking to my colleagues who've been keeping score. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I make that 38 for the motion and 11 against.
And I'm a little bit slower at counting, but I also make it 38 and 11 against the motion. So the motion is carried.
Thank you. So the motion is carried. Thank you. Item 6.3, Revised Capital Plan, page 99. I call on Councillor Barclay to propose the item.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To enable the approval of the revised capital plan, which will become the basis for capital spending by the Council for the period ending the 31st of March 2023, I move that the revised capital plan for 2023 for the General Fund and Housing Revenue Account streams set out in Appendix 2 to the report of the Head of Financial Services attached to the annex is approved.
Thank you. Councillor Harper-Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I second this item and reserve my right to speak. Thank you.
Thank you. If any councillor would like to speak, please press the raised hand feature in the Zoom. Councillor Emma Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As shadow support for climate emergency and carbon management, I'd just like to express on behalf of the Labour Group our disappointment on learning that the Carbon Neutral Action Fund budget has been slashed from 500,000 to 100,000, so by a total of 80% altogether. And yes, we are well aware of the incredible financial strains on the council at the moment, but I do find it greatly concerning that the concept of the green recovery may have passed this council by. I appreciate that the council's recently acquired a new, more energy efficient waste fleet, although that's not come from the carbon neutral budget, and that the council is looking to install EV charging points, but this is not nearly enough to make an impact. This reduced budget is going to make it extremely challenging to achieve the target of becoming carbon neutral by 2030. And I would like to ask when a revised version of a carbon neutral action plan can be expected. Lastly, in light of the comments made during the last item by Councillor Barclay about his willingness to collaborate with opposite members, I'd like to ask if they will consider offering us a place on the Carbon Action Board so that we can contribute our ideas. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mary Draycott.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just for the record, in responding to Councillor Barclay's comments, Labour members do understand the budget, and we think that because it's a public meeting, or the more importantly, that we refer to the facts and that we tell the accurate information that we're working to, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Barclay also, Councillor Barclay also made comments about the fact that Labour members don't approach him or make ideas or suggestions. Well, one's just been made by Councillor Ward, and I did make one in the previous report asking for a reserve list to be drawn up of all those items in the capital programme that are at risk of being deleted. Now, he didn't respond to that, Mr. Mayor, So I do think it's a little unacceptable to criticise Labour group for not coming up with ideas and questions and suggestions when we do. And also Councillor Baldwin asked a question as well. Addressing the report in front of us, it was particularly the housing section that caught my eye on the back page 114. The revised budget was just over £8 million or nearly £9 million, and the actual spend 8,357. Probably very good reasons why a lot of that work hasn't been able to be done. However, it did make me think that it's about time members had a report back on the contractor Fortnum's, and I would ask the leader or the cabinet lead responsible for council properties if we could have that report, and as soon as possible, because I'm getting the impression that there could be possibly big issues to do with that contract, and we do need to have a look at that report. So I think in all at this meeting, Mr. Mayor, the opposition members have made a number of suggestions, comments, asked questions, and it would be nice if we got some answers and some positive replies to them. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. And could I welcome Councillor Hunt to the our meeting tonight. Councillor Jill Muir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I echo what Councillor Draycott has said. Labour members have made contributions in this meeting, but I think Councillor Barclay has the red mist come in front of him, especially when one of our we talk and doesn't actually take a note of actually what we are saying or requesting. Maybe he wants to replay back the video of this meeting, because you'll know I wasn't actually ever critical of our officers. I just was critical of their decision to support a private enterprise to the tune of £700,000 plus, especially when we're in a deficit of such making. But we'll leave that be, because that was a previous item. But on this capital plan, Mr. Mayor, I've made myself clear that I was uncomfortable with increasing borrowing on commercial property. I won't repeat it because the same applies in this document as well, because it's a theme that runs through. I just want to ask clarification on why the capital plan is decreasing the Charnwood Community Facility Grant by £118,000. Does it not sound hypocritical that we send out a press release a week before saying that we are supporting our communities and voluntary groups and making a big hoo-ha out of it, whereas in the very next week we're actually decreasing by a greater amount the amount available to our communities? So if you could answer that specific question, because that is a question. If not, if you just feel so you can't do that, I'll accept a written answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Roy Rollins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just picking up on a couple of the points made by Councillor Ward in relation to the reduction in the funding for the carbon neutral project which we've got going on. Clearly, it's disappointing that funding has had to be reviewed and there has been a fairly significant reduction in the budget. But what I can say and give the assurance to councillors is that a lot of work has taken place since that reduction was announced to review what we can do to still achieve our carbon neutral target for being carbon neutral by 2030. And what I can say is a lot of those projects that we were planning on doing can still go ahead, because we had a number of short-term projects that will still fit within the new budget. We've got additional feasibility work now taking place into some of the bigger projects to see how we can deliver that within the 2030 target which we've set. We're introducing a cycle to work scheme, which is coming into play fairly soon. So we haven't missed the chance for green recovery. We're absolutely on top of that. And we're putting things in place as we speak to make sure that we capture any potential benefits from that. And of course, there's been a huge cultural shift and working shift over the last few months as well that the pandemic has brought, which brings new opportunities, which we need to assess. So lots of work is taking place. Always happy to have conversations with any councillors about what we're doing. And of course, we have appointed Councillor Needham, the Green Party councillor, to the Carbon Neutral Board. So she does sit on the board with me and a couple of other councillors. So lots is going on, lots of collaborative work is taking place. One thing I have committed to do is to keep councillors up to date with a regular update after the Carbon Neutral Board. So you'll get your first one soon, so you can understand exactly what we're going to do to deal with the plans and targets that we've set to be carbon neutral by 2030 with this new revised budget. Thank you.
Thank you. I can see no more raised hands, so I go to reserving your right, Councillor Harper-Davies.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have nothing further to add. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I now call on Councillor Barclay to sum up?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Despite the challenges which have arisen because of the pandemic, I'm pleased to bring forward this revised capital plan, which enables us to invest in the borough and Loughborough Town and create business opportunities for our borough. The principal items coming forward are the increase in the commercial borrowing limit to 25 million to enable us to invest prudently within specific criteria, invest 15 million in the regeneration. This is in addition to all the other things that we're going to be doing in the capital plan, which you can see. Yes, we have had to reduce the Charmond Community Facilities grant. It's clearly outlined on page 109. I have actually offered an explanation to Councillor Waldron regarding the increased cost of the Serco contract. I have offered to listen to any ideas that the Labour opposition have brought forward. Now, I certainly don't see any red mist at all. My screen's quite clear. We've got a lot of good things. We have a plan which shows investment in our borough and in housing schemes of up to 96 million over the period up to 93. It's going to make a major contribution to our borough. It's certainly the way ahead. As I say, please, if the opposition want to scrutinise things or want to ask questions, the officers are always there. I'm always there. Within the scrutiny panel, please ask them. Don't wait till tonight, because we're here to debate the capital plan, which is sound and it quite clearly shows that we are doing other things apart from the £55 million worth of investment in the enterprise-owned commercial lending and town centre regeneration. So it is laid out quite clear. You can see the absolute wealth of projects that we've got coming forward to on the annex going forward at 110. Always happy to listen to ideas. It's something that, to be honest, there hasn't been any ideas come forward on the capital plan or budget. There's been criticism, there's been, but no real solid ideas. And I'm more than happy to talk at any time to any member about them. But we have a really good capital plan, and I commend it to councillors.
Thank you. I'm now putting the motion to the vote. Members should indicate the way in which they wish to vote by raising their virtual hand, and the votes will be counted and verified. Members for the motion, please raise your virtual hand.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If once again councillors could keep their hands raised until we get to the bottom of the list. So councillors for, Councillor Bentley, Councillor Harper-Davies, Councillor Taylor, Councillor Campsell, Councillor Morgan, Councillor Bailey, Councillor Simon Bradshaw, Councillor Smidovitz, Councillor Rattray, Councillor Shepherd, Councillor Ransom, Councillor Howe, Councillor Poland, Councillor Pacey, Councillor Popley, Councillor Rollings, Councillor Savage, Councillor Capleton, Councillor Radford, Councillor Fryer, Councillor Brooks, Councillor Charles, Councillor Needham, Councillor Barclay, Councillor Paling, Councillor Lowe, Councillor Murphy, Councillor Snart, Councillor Mercer, Councillor Baines, Councillor Boker, Councillor Hunt, Councillor Parsons, Councillor Seaton, Councillor Tassell, Councillor Parton, and Councillor Gerard. And are there any other councillors who don't have access to the raised hands feature who wish to vote for?
Just looking through the list, I can't see anyone else with what I call pink hands showing. So
I make that 37 for?
Sorry, Councillor Haji Nicolau is trying to raise his hand.
Hi, I don't know I have a problem with this system, but actually I'm 4 too. I have not heard my name.
Let me check. You're quite right, Councillor Haji Nicolau, so we will add you on.
Thank you.
38 for.
Thank you.
And I also confirm that is 38 for.
Could we now take the hands down so we can do the next bit, please?
We'll gradually go through.
Thank you. Members against the vote, please raise your hands virtually.
So members against, Councillor Julie Bradshaw, Councillor Keith Harris, Councillor Draycott, Councillor Goddard, Councillor Mia, Councillor Tillotson, Councillor Hamilton, Councillor Ward, Councillor Brennan, Councillor Baldwin, Councillor Forrest. Are there any people who haven't been able to raise their hand who wish to vote against? No, it's right. Make that 11 councillors voting against, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Would you take the hands down again?
And I confirm that's 11 against as well.
Thank you. And members wishing to abstain, please raise your virtual hands. I think everybody's voted.
Yeah, everyone has voted.
Yeah.
There were 49 to vote. So
Thank you. And the motion is carried. Thank you. Move on to item 6.4, Member Development Strategy 2020-2024, page 115. I call on Councillor Smidovich to propose the item.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that it be recommended to Council that the Member Development Strategy 2020 to 2024 set out in Appendix A to this report be approved for the reasons as set out on page 115. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Popley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wish to second the motion and reserve my right to speak.
Thank you. If any councillors would like to speak, please press the raise hand feature in the Zoom. I've got Councillor Ted Parton.
One of the most important aspects.
I'm sorry, Ted, we've lost you again.
It's muted.
Yeah, it suddenly went mute.
All right.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I didn't think anybody could do that to you, Ted, so off we go.
During the global financial crash of 2008 and 2009 and the global recession that followed, some research was done in America to decide whether it was better to spend money on redundancies or actually training staff, despite the fact that many businesses were struggling across the world. And it was found that actually to invest more in your staff at that period of time had a much greater effect and was a real catalyst in propelling businesses safely out of the global crash. And there's such a host of training opportunities available now for councillors that just even a few short years ago in 2012 just didn't seem to be available. And the Local Government Association obviously advertised quite a few, and the East Midlands councils events when we used to go to Melton, and hopefully we'll be returning to Melton, some real quality events. So I can't emphasize enough that during this difficult time, now's the time to learn and to improve and to find the answers to the aspects of your professional development that you need some help with.
Thank you. Councillor Mary Draycott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Labour members would just like to say thank you to all of the officers for all of the work involved in arranging and presenting these training sessions. They are very important to members, and also of late with the change to doing them virtually meant extra work for them. So just to place on record our thanks for all that work, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Alice Brennan.
Thank you. I would just like to echo Councillor Draycott's comments and thank the officers. As a new councillor, you know, I was very impressed at the amount of training that was available. The quality of a lot of that training was very, very helpful. And also the fact that they seek feedback and continually seek to support us as best they can so that we can fulfill our roles is really, it's really makes one feel confident in our officers that we can come to them and ask for support and know that we'll be given the answers that we're seeking. And I'd really like to thank the officers involved in member development for all their hard work.
Thank you. Councillor Pauline Ranson.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much. I would like to reiterate everything everybody has said, especially I'm a little bit of a dimbo where it comes to this type of mechanism, and the officers and the IT department have been so helpful. It's been unbelievable, and I would like that put on record for Matt and his crew and everybody in the IT and the officers in democratic services. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think probably from me, that's lovely, and I think that could be taken back by the lead member probably to officers just to say how pleased members were. Could I now go back? I think we reserve the right, and it will be Councillor Popley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First, may I take this opportunity to congratulate my colleague, Councillor Smidovic, other members and officers involved in the evident hard work done to prepare such a comprehensive paper for us to consider. I wish to draw all members to the second paragraph of the executive summary on page 124 of tonight's papers. And I quote, "The overarching aim of the strategy is therefore to ensure that there is support for all members to enable them to acquire sufficient knowledge and a full range of skills to maximise their ability and capacity." I also wish to reiterate section 7 of the paper, which as a relatively new councillor myself, find encouraging that thought and consideration has gone into this particular segment. I'm in quite a unique position, having once sat on the opposite side of the table in legal services at Charnwood Borough Council, so I'm acutely aware of the hard work members of staff put into ensuring the council can function on a daily basis, especially during these uncertain times of pandemic. So well done again to all. There are other areas of notable consideration too, namely sections 3 and 6. Learning doesn't stop when you leave school, and we can always be taught more. Therefore, I now hope members of all sides will support Councillor Smidovic and others who've worked so hard on ensuring the future of member development goes from strength to strength at Charnwood Borough Council. Thank you all for listening to me.
Thank you. Now I'll call on Councillor Smidovic to sum up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's been 4 years since this council approved the last member development strategy, and the recommended strategy has been amended to include a number of new approaches and activities to support our 52 councillors and prospective councillors in the run-up to the borough election, the new borough elections in 2023. So thinking about the future, the council's corporate strategy sets out what the council will be doing to make Charnwood a stronger, more vibrant place for people to live, work, visit and invest in. And many of the objectives setting out in our corporate plan have been accelerated by unexpected events and had a significant impact on our culture, which is described as the way we do things around here. This has presented both opportunities and the challenge to employees and elected members. It is, as Councillor Popley has said, an underlying premise of the member development strategy to ensure that there is support for all members to enable them to acquire sufficient knowledge and a full range of skills to maximise their ability and capacity, which in turn benefits the council. It recognises that it is people that make things happen, and councillors and co-opted members have a personal responsibility to develop their potential. As Lou Holtz said, I never learn anything by talking. I only learn when I ask questions. So I encourage you all to keep asking the questions, and thank you very much for all the comments you've made that are positive. And I would also have to add my thanks and gratitude to all the officers that have been involved. It really is appreciated, and they have done more than has been expected on occasion to help sort us out. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Now putting the motion to the vote. Members should indicate the way in which they wish to vote by raising their virtual hand, and the votes will be counted and verified. Members for the motion, please raise your virtual hand.
So, Mr. Mayor, councillors for: Councillor Rollings, Councillor Harper-Davies, Councillor Fryer, Councillor Ranson, Councillor Barclay, Councillor Poland, Councillor Morgan, Councillor Mear, Councillor Capleton, Councillor Paling, Councillor Parton, Councillor Parsons, Councillor Bentley, Councillor Radford, Councillor Bailey, Councillor Forrest, Councillor Julie Bradshaw, Councillor Simon Bradshaw, Councillor Grimley, Councillor Pacey, Councillor Howe, Councillor Rattray, Councillor Taylor, Councillor Draycott, Councillor Brooks, Councillor Savage, Councillor Popley, Councillor Hamilton, Councillor Hunt, Councillor Brennan, Councillor Charles, Councillor Shepherd, Councillor Campsell, Councillor Baldwin, Councillor Goddard, Councillor Gerard, Councillor Needham, Councillor Ward, Councillor Mercer, Councillor Baines, Councillor Murphy, Councillor Snart, Councillor Boker, Councillor Tillotson, Councillor Hadji Nicolaou, Councillor Smidovitz, Councillor Tassell, Councillor Seaton, Councillor Keith Harris. Is there anybody else who hasn't been able to use the raise hand feature? So, Mr. Mayor, might I make that 49 in favour?
I also make that 40. I've actually got it as 50 actually. So
it might be worth just checking, Mr. Mayor, that if anybody wants to vote against or abstain, and if not, obviously it's then unanimous.
Okay. So could I just say, if members against the vote, could they please raise their hand? Oh,
just need to clear the hands.
Yeah. That's it. So members against the vote, please raise your virtual hand. The members wishing to abstain, please raise your hand. So I think it's unanimous. Agreed?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, that's unanimous.
Thank you. The motion is carried. Thank you. And I move on now to item 7, call-in references. There are no call-in references from scrutiny. Item 8 is no request position statements. No request for a position statement has been received. Item 9, motion on notice. There is one motion on notice on the agenda on page 140, sky lanterns and helium balloons. As a reminder, motions in this form can be debated and voted on by the council. The normal rules of debate apply, so councillors can make speeches up to 3 minutes and amendments can be moved. I call on Councillor Fryer to propose her motion.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I move the motion as set out on page 140 of the agenda papers with an amendment to point 2, so that point 2 reads, refuse the sale of any sky lanterns at any council event or property. This amendment is deemed necessary to enable helium balloons to be sold at the annual Loughborough Fair and at any council-owned premises where a tenant may sell helium balloons.
Thank you. Councillor Needham.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I second this motion as it's amended and I reserve my right to speak.
Thank you. If any councillor would like to speak, please press and raise the hand feature in Zoom. Councillor Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This made me chuckle actually. Going back to what Councillor Barclay said. So we had this similar motion to this at the county council, and it was shared with the other groups. The Conservative group shared it with the other groups before they submitted it. And I pointed out the helium part to my group leader then, who took it back to the Conservative group, and it got amended there. It amuses me, the debate we've had and the conversations we've had earlier in the meeting, that this motion actually wasn't shared with the Labour group before it was submitted. And the irony is that the Conservative group have actually had to amend their own motion before it's come before us today. But putting that to one side, we will be supporting this motion. We think it's if that's something that the Conservative group think is essential to put forward for the council at this time, we're happy to support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Tom Barclay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. An excellent motion put forward for obvious reasons. Really, we don't want fires around the borough. We don't want the animals to be damaged. And that's why the motion has been put forward, and everything else is superfluous, really. I fully support it.
Thank you. Leader, Councillor Jonathan Morgan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Just to comment on the point that raised by Councillor Meir, he said that I think that at the County Council meeting he had taken the point about helium balloons back and it was removed. I've just had a quick look at the motion as published as being the decided motion at the County Council, which actually still includes the reference to helium balloons on County Council land. So just to make it clear that actually this motion as amended by Councillor Needham and Councillor Fryer is actually not the same as the County Council one. It's actually more up to date. Thank you. And I will be supporting it.
Thank you. Got no more blue hands. So Councillor Needham.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I'm pleased to see this motion come, and I'm happy to have seconded it. I think we all know the problems that there is with sky lanterns and the damage that they can cause, not just to wildlife and farm animals, but also it can damage property as well, causing fires. Helium balloons are just another example of single-use plastic that literally never goes away. So I think it's important that the council is leading on this by example, and hopefully that highlights the issue to residents, and also it hopefully prompts other smaller councils like parish and town councils and also local businesses to think about their own policies on these helium balloons and sky lanterns. So obviously I'll be supporting the motion, and I hope that all the other groups will as well. And thank you to Councillor Fryer for bringing this motion.
Thank you. Call on Councillor Fryer to sum up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to my colleagues. I think this Councillor Meir made a comment about it was altered at county, I think, and he didn't know we were altering the amendment from it, but this is where we work together. And I held my hand up. When I heard about it at county, I thought that Charnwood should do the same. And I think the fact that we've amended the second point just shows that we're thinking it just doesn't need one person to put forward a motion. We work cohesively, and it was agreed that we should slightly alter it. It has been mentioned sky lanterns, or as when I was much younger, they were known as Chinese lanterns, have caused across the world or the country quite a lot of damage at times. The fact about helium balloons is what we're trying to do there is we don't want to discourage children or people to have one balloon, take it home, dispose of it sensibly, which is why we amended it. What we didn't want to see, which was very popular some time ago and probably would have been this year as well, is the mass release of helium balloons from council land. So someone had used one of our premises or one of our areas or parks for a party or a wedding or some celebration to suddenly let go 30, 40 balloons, which do an awful lot of damage to the wildlife and to domestic animals. Although we sometimes forget that this borough does have an awful lot of areas that do have farmland and open spaces. So I hope that this will be wholeheartedly supported, and I would like to thank Councillor Needham for being willing to second it. Thank you.
Thank you. Now putting the motion as amended to the vote, members should indicate the way in which they wish to vote by raising their virtual hand, and the votes will be counted and verified. Members, for the motion, please raise your virtual hand.
So members voting for Mr Mayor: Councillor Bentley, Councillor Tassell, Councillor Forrest, Councillor Capleton, Councillor Fryer, Councillor Barclay, Councillor Goddard, Councillor Popley, Councillor Ranson, Councillor Gerard, Councillor Rattray, Councillor Parton, Councillor Mear, Councillor Baines, Councillor Radford, Councillor Hamilton, Councillor Bailey, Councillor Campsall, Councillor Lowe, Councillor Morgan, Councillor Rollins, Councillor Draycott, Councillor Keith Harris, Councillor Margaret Smidowitz, Councillor Simon Bradshaw, Councillor Hunt, Councillor Poland, Councillor Boker, Councillor Brooks, Councillor Parsons, Councillor Howe, Councillor Julie Bradshaw, Councillor Savage, Councillor Shepherd, Councillor Pacey, Councillor Taylor, Councillor Paling, Councillor Charles, Councillor Ward, Councillor Seaton, Councillor Needham, Councillor Brennan, Councillor Murphy, Councillor Baldwin, Councillor Grimley, Councillor Snart, Councillor Haji Nicolaou, Councillor Tillotson, Councillor Mercer, Councillor Harper-Davies. So is there anybody else who hadn't been able to raise their hand? I tally that as 51, Mr Mayor.
Thank you.
Which can't be right.
I've got 51 as well, actually.
So how many attendees do we have, Karen?
As far as I know, we've got 50 actually, so that's very strange. We've got an extra one that appeared.
I think, Mr Mayor, for the purposes of the vote, we can say it's unanimous.
Okay. Yeah.
I thought I heard you call Councillor Palin twice.
That might explain it then.
Yeah.
But I think, Mr Mayor, it's definitely a unanimous vote.
Okay, thank you. So the motion is carried. Thank you. I move on to item 10 now, and we'll probably lower the hands if we could, just in case. That's brilliant. Thank you. We move on to item 10, questions on notice. As a reminder, the questions that council have submitted and the answers to them are in the supplementary pack. I will call on those councillors who have indicated that they wish to ask a supplementary question. Supplementary questions relate directly or extensively to the question submitted, and any other supplementary question will not be permitted. Each councillor will have 1 minute to ask their supplementary question, and the councillor responding will also be able to speak for 1 minute. I just bring to your attention, this was changed with the Constitution. So you just have a supplementary question now and not a statement. So we'll try this and go forward. Item 10.1 is Expressway. Councillor Grimley, would you like to ask your supplementary question?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I mean, reports from the last meeting of Midlands indicate that the project is about to be cancelled. But does the lead member think a scaled-back road network provision in the south of Leicestershire would help to evenly distribute housing provision in the county?
Thank you. And I'd ask Councillor Bailey, do you wish to respond?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Grimley, for your question. I don't want to preempt any decisions that are coming out of the report, hopefully later on this month. However, you know, we do support any roadway that will help distribute housing towards the south of the city. Obviously, currently it is pushed all towards the north and the northeast of the city, and anything that would help to redistribute that is greatly welcome.
Thank you. Item 10.2, Jobs Market. Councillor Gerard, would you like to ask your supplementary question?
Thank you. Yes. Will this council endorse a monthly job market in the town? Give companies space to set out their stalls in the town centre, providing the weather is cooperating and the start of the market is next year. Have it as a market, but instead of goods on display, it will be jobs. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Boker, do you wish to respond?
Thank you, Councillor Gerard. There was actually a response in the documentation for this evening. I think the question from Mr. Mayor was, having read that response, did you have a supplementary question?
I'll leave it at that, thank you. Section 10.3 is 106 agreements. Councillor Taylor, would you like to ask your supplementary question?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I thank the lead member for their response, and I will look into those points that he's raised there with officers offline. But just one question there, it's mentioned about judicial review of the decision. So I'm just asking what the time frame is for a judicial review on a planning condition.
Councillor Bailey, do you wish to respond?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Taylor, for your question. In brief answer, it's 6 weeks from the decision having been made. So hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you. Item 10.4, communication strategy. Councillor Draycott, would you like to ask your supplementary question?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The answer given confirms my concerns, and that is that 20% of 65-year-olds plus do not have access to the internet, therefore potential to miss out on important information during this pandemic. But the leader or cabinet lead informed council how they intend to address this serious situation. Thank you.
Councillor Morgan, do you wish to respond?
Mr. Mayor, thank you very much for that. We are obviously looking at this. It is an ongoing issue as regional papers particularly sort of fade away. And as a result, the whole way of communicating with our residents will change. So this is something we are currently looking into. And over the next 12 months, we'll be bringing forward a paper to explain how we wish to address this.
Thank you. Item 10.5, Charnwood Community Action. Councillor Draycott, would you like to ask your supplementary question?
I have no supplementary question, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Item 10.6, homelessness and eviction. Councillor Forrest, would you like to ask your supplementary question?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I thank the lead member for their response. I welcome the information regarding homelessness in the borough during the winter. However, I am less sanguine about our eviction policy and will seek, I seek further information from the lead member about the very good reasons why we will evict, and I would like to know what these reasons are. However, I'm happy to do this by email rather than here, but I'm happy to hear from the lead member.
Councillor Poland, I don't think there was a question there, but
oh, there was.
Was there? I'm
yes,
terribly sorry.
Yeah.
Terribly sorry. I'll take that all back. And Councillor Poland.
Thank you, Councillor Forrest, for your question. So the quick answer to your question is serious behaviour would be serious antisocial behaviour. So if you've got a resident who's committed violence, for instance, is racist, is something of that order, so very high level offences, this would be the serious nature of it. But in reality, we have to give 6 months notice to evict anyone. And again, in reality, the government have stopped evictions during the lockdown anyway, in terms of bailiffs going in. So the reality is we won't be evicting anyone this side of Christmas. It's highly, highly, highly unlikely. But if something was to occur, like I've just outlined, that would be a serious matter. If you do have any further questions, though, by all means, do come to me and I'll get those answered.
I think I was wrong. Apologies. Item 10.7, travel between counties. Councillor Forrest, would you like to ask your supplementary question?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I think events overtook us. I submitted my question and then we were all into lockdown. All I would say is that I think after lockdown, we will be in one tier or another, and that the advice I sought then would be reconsidered in the light of what happens after December the 2nd. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Morgan, would you wish to respond?
Events, dear councillor, events. Yes, I completely agree with you. Look, we'll probably all be in tears eventually. We just need to decide which one it is. But I absolutely agree with you. Once we actually have a better picture, then we'll hopefully have a chance to actually communicate that. And also trying to encourage our media to communicate that accurately. I was slightly horrified by how many news reporters I came across the week after we moved into up to tier 2 who were completely oblivious to the tiers of other neighbouring areas.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll move on to item 11, minute references. There are no minute references. Item 12, change to delegating and executive functions, page 141. This is a report to inform the council of changes to the delegation of executive functions. If any councillor would like to ask a question, please indicate your wish to do so by pressing the raised hand feature in Zoom. No, I've got no hands raised. We'll carry on to item 13, urgent executive decision, exempt from call-in, page 146. This is a report to inform council of decisions which were exempt from call-in in accordance with Security Committee Procedure 11.9. If any councillor would like to ask a question, please indicate your wish to do so by pressing the raise hand feature in Zoom. May I remind councillors that this item has an exempt Appendix C. Should any councillor wish to have any questions on this appendix, please indicate before you ask the question, as a resolution to exclude the press and public may be required. I've got one raised hand, which is Councillor Colin Hamilton.
Yes, thank you. First of all, I shan't discuss anything in the exempt appendix in my question.
Thank you.
So my question is focused on the purchase of the property on Belton Road. So everything we discuss is in the main public document. So I'm not challenging the purchase. What I'm observing is the report states that having done an analysis based on external borrowing to ensure the profitability of the investment and ensure any borrowing is prudential, the report then states that it is highly unlikely that Charnwood will secure borrowing at 100% of the capital value. Now, reading the report, it seems that part of the rationale of that is that the benefit of lower interest costs by using internal borrowing. So my question is, in this purchase, why are we leaning towards such an emphasis on internal borrowing when analysis should have shown that even at 100% external borrowing, it is profitable, since even if costs are lowered using internal borrowing, it's not the only consideration. Since not only is that potentially diverting monies away from expenditure normally associated with the duties of a council towards a commercial project, the report seems to indicate that the use of internal borrowing will itself introduce some risks that have to be monitored and managed, and that additional external debt may then need to be taken in the future. So why such an emphasis on internal borrowing for this purchase?
The leader, Councillor Morgan, would you like to respond to that question?
I will do. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. It's principally, as really explained in the training that was carried out in the past week, the difference between external borrowing and internal borrowing, in particular on this, is actually the rate of interest that gets charged. So the rate of interest that we charge for our internal borrowing, and internal borrowing, by the way, is in relation to our general cash flow. It's not necessarily reserves that we have, it's the cash that goes through the organisation, is obviously a notional interest rate. And as a result, it means that by actually having a lower notional interest rate than the MIP rate or the commercial rate that's otherwise modelled against, means that actually more money comes into our revenue account, which means that we can actually then spend that on services. If we use external borrowing, then the level is slightly higher, and as a result, the amount that we actually get to retain for service provision is lower. Now, overall, the 151 officer will determine how much internal borrowing is prudent. And at that point, we will obviously look at external borrowing from the Public Loans Board, etc. At that point. But the Public Loans Board itself, because of the way that our finance is structured, they don't loan against a particular property. They actually loan against effectively the portfolio to the organisation. And it does mean as a result that any commercial rate would not be set necessarily against one particular property. It would actually be set against a spread, a basket of properties. So the amount that we still get through the revenue into the revenue account would actually still be quite positive, because we'd actually utilise external borrowing and internal borrowing at the same time. Sorry if that probably is not particularly clear, but by all means, have a chat with one of our officer team through the Chief Exec, and I'm sure he's more than happy to actually give you a one-to-one explanation. It's not straightforward, but it is straightforward once you actually get your head around it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I've got no more raised hands, so I think members should indicate the way which they wish to vote by raising their virtual hand, and the votes will be counted and verified. Members,
Sorry,
for the...
Mr. Mayor, there is no vote on this. It's just for information and questions.
Okay, so
that was
I
in
can
case
move.
we needed to go into exempt session, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, yes, sorry. Yeah, I've got it. Thank you for that. Could I just now move on? And we're getting towards the end, which is, I'm now moving on to item 14, appointments to committees. There are no appointments to committees I'm aware of. Are there any appointments to committees? Thank you for the, and all I can say now is the close of business. We're getting towards the end of the year again, and I guess we won't be meeting again before Christmas. So I don't know what Christmas is going to be like. I don't think we do know in terms of where we'll be, but I'm sure that we will make the best of it. And I wish councillors a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And thank you for tonight. I think it went reasonably well. So